Today we're going to be testing the coolant system on this C7 Cat. This is a 2004 out of a school bus. We're just using this today because everything's out in the open. Could kind of show you guys what to check for. So first thing we always do, make sure you have on a good pair of safety glasses. You should always be wearing them, but especially when you're working with a liquid like coolant. Okay, so next what we want to do, we want to remove the radiator cap. You should always do this when it's nice and cold. I'm not going to lie to you, sometimes you're going to have to do this out in the field. There's been hundreds of times where I had to check the coolant system on a nice hot vehicle right off the road. So we'll show you how to try to do it as safe as you can, but definitely try to make sure it's cold if you can. Give it a few hours to cool down. First thing we're going to do, we got to remove the radiator cap. If you want to see if it's cool enough, put your hand on the tank, feel it for heat. Also, you're going to want to check the radiator hoses. Sometimes the coolant isn't up in the expansion tank yet, but once you take that cap off, the steam will rise up to there. So check your coolant hoses. If you could reach the radiator, reach in and touch the radiator. Make sure it's nice and cool. Whenever you can, try to elevate yourself above the coolant tank. If I'm down here right now and I take this cap off and there's liquid that shoots out, it's going to get me right in the face. If you can't avoid that, put on a face shield over top of your safety glasses. If you're working on something hot, make sure you have on a face shield, especially when you first take the cap off. So we know this is nice and cool. It's been sitting in the shop, hasn't been ran in months. So I'm going to elevate myself up above it here. So what I'm going to do, you should always take a rag even if it's cool. Don't take chances. These caps come off in two different stages. The first time when I turn it, it's just going to let steam and stuff out. So if this had any steam in there, if it was hot at all, what this would allow me to do, have that on there. I turn it to the first stage. The steam starts coming out. I could hear it come out. I could feel it on my hands, but it's not burning me yet. So this allows me to tighten that cap back up. If I didn't have that rag on there and I turned it and steam started coming out, it's going to burn my hands. I'm going to pull away. Then all that steam's just going to come up right in my face. So we have that on the sealed all the way down, first stage. Take our rag, just turn it to the first stage, let up on it. This allows the pressure to come out. See, it's loose on there now. Then to take it off the second stage, we push down on it again and rotate it around, and the cap will come off. So I'll show you that one time without the rag, but always use a rag even if it's cold. Okay, so I turn it, pops off this first stage. It won't let me turn any further, it's locked on there, but it lets all the steam come out. I push down on the cap, now I can rotate it all the way off. Okay, so first thing you do when you pull the cap off, look down in the tank if you can. See where the level is in there. The level's never going to be all the way to the top in there. It has overflow hoses and stuff on it, allowing it to seek its own level. A lot of the systems on trucks and big tractors are going to hold between 10 and 20 gallons of coolant. So at $10 a gallon for the cheaper coolant, 20 for the mid-range stuff. If we have 10 gallons at $20 a gallon, that's $200 of coolant right there. So if we know we have a leak on an engine, like we know we have a leak on this one, we're going to top it off with water, or we're going to drain all the coolant out if we're going to recover it. Don't add $20 coolant to it because you're going to be losing it. So what we're going to do, I got water in here. We're just going to top this off with water. Use a coolant jug's easier, like this one, little watering can. Or you can just use the gallon jug, but it gets a little messy. Use a funnel if you do that. You don't want to get coolant on any good paint or anything. It can take paint off. Okay, so now that we have our system full here, what we're going to do, we're going to get a pressure tester. Pressure testers come in all different varieties. This one's just a snap-on hand pump model. So what we're going to do, we're going to get out our tester, make sure the hose and everything's good on it. Make sure the seal is on here. The seal does come off. They are replaceable, so make sure that is on there. If that doesn't seal the tank. You're not going to build up any pressure. Okay, next thing we're going to do, we're going to check our cap. Every cap has a number on it. That number stands for how many pounds the system is. Whenever you can, check the manufacturer's recommendations for the pressure of the system. Sometimes people just get in a pinch and throw any cap on there they can. You always want to make sure the system has the right cap. This one's a 10-pound one. This one's a 15 PSI one. So the 10-pound one's the one we took off of there. That's the one we're going to use today. But there's no markings or anything on here telling me what the coolant system pressure should be. So if you can get to a manual, check it out. If not, tend to stay towards the low side a little bit. On older engines like this is a 2004, 10 to 12 pounds is probably the right range. Old farm tractors and stuff, you're going to be talking like 2 to 5 PSI. Newer stuff that has a EGR cooler or anything on it, you're going to be between 15 and 20 PSI on that. Okay, so 10 PSI, we'll set this cap here where we know where it's at. We're going to come back to that later. Going to take our pressure tester here. I always like to pump it a couple times when it's out, just to make sure no spiders or anything climbed up inside there while it was in storage. You'd hear the air come out of there. Okay, so now we're going to go back up our ladder here. So you can see this cap, or this pressure tester. You'd see that this thing turns right here. So you need to have this in the upper position. It'll go on there nice and easy. Once you get it on there, then you turn this little valve right here, and that locks that cap down on there. So now we can build pressure. So this is a 10 PSI system. So we do not want to go above 10 PSI unless we go 1 or 2 pounds over. But we definitely don't want to get up, past 15 pounds with it, because you will develop a leak. Get up in the red. I know 20 PSI is normal for some systems. But you get up in the 20 PSI on a 10-pound system, you're going to probably blow out the radiator and definitely blow a hose out. Okay, so we're going to start pumping. So if we didn't top off our coolant at this point, we'd be pumping forever. You can see we're starting to climb there. We're almost at 10 PSI. Actually starting to hear a little leak come out. Starting to hear a little leak of water come out down below. So we'll put this right at 10 right here, and we'll go check out our leak. Just let that hang there. So as you're walking around the engine, always make sure the floor is nice and dry where you're doing the pressure test. Then it's really easy to spot the leak. See underneath here, we already have a leak forming out of the radiator someplace. But as we're walking around, we're going to be checking all the hoses. All these hoses now have pressure inside them. You shouldn't see any coolant or anything running down the block. You see it running on the floor right there. Always have a little flashlight with you. We'll get down and check this out. You can see this is coming out of, it looks like it's coming out of the hose right now, but if you look above it, it's actually running down the radiator. So we look in here right now. You can see it's coming out of the bottom tank of the radiator right there. So what we would have to do is remove the radiator and get it repaired or replaced. So everything else looks pretty good. Remember, this is not the radiator in front, this is the charge air cooler. So it doesn't do any good to check this. The radiator is actually behind it there. Best way to do that if you can is from the back side, if the fan's not on there, or if there's enough gap between it where you can see in there good. Check all your hoses. Don't be afraid to grab a hold of stuff and tweak it a little bit. Sometimes the hose won't leak until it's vibrating or moving a little bit. Then when it flexes, the coolant will start coming out. So don't be afraid to grab a hold of stuff and move it around a little bit. Okay, so everything else looks good right now besides our radiator leaking up there. So now what we're going to do, we're going to come remove this off of there. You can still see that we barely or under 10 psi there. Okay, now we can remove everything from the system. You can see we're still just dropping slightly under 10 psi there. Just lost a little bit of pressure, but we are leaking on the ground. So you can see the purpose of pressure testing now. With it just sitting here, it didn't leak at all. But now that we're up to 10 psi, which the system would be driving down the road and stuff, it would get up to 10 psi. You would see that it start to leak. So this would only leak under normal operating conditions, not just sitting someplace. So that's why we have to pressure test stuff. So now we're going to remove the pressure tester. With this design here, sometimes it gets a little liquidy. So you grab another paper towel here. Okay, so we're going to get back up here. So our little petcock here, we're just going to slowly open a little bit now. You can hear the air starting to come out. If I open this too fast right now, liquid would come out. So we're going to do it nice and slow. See, we're slowly dropping. Don't be in a rush at this stage. Let it take its time. If you took this cap off right now, chances are you'd get a face full of steam or liquid. So just let it go down to manageable pressure. Okay, we're almost all the way out. Okay, now we're down to 0. So there's still just a little bit of pressure in there. See how it pops some liquid out? So that was at about 1 psi. If we did that at 10 psi, we would have got a bath. So make sure the pressure's out. Now we can take the cap off. Make sure that rubber came with you. Make sure it's not stuck down in there. Okay, so now we're going to pump our pressure tester again. Get any liquid that shot up in there out. Make sure everything's wiped off before you put it away. These testers are the mechanic's best friend. They're not very expensive. This one here is probably between $75 and $100. You can get air-operated ones that range, up to $200. But this is really all you need for most situations, unless you're doing it constantly every day. So next, we're going to pressure test the cap here. So like I said, this is a 10-pound cap. So this builds up to 10 psi in the system. Won't let the system get above 10 psi. So an important thing to remember when we're talking about the boiling point of the coolant. So this coolant here, say we have water in here, boils at 212 degrees. Say our system right now is 220 degrees. With our 10-pound cap on there, the system is not boiling right now. It's not turning into steam. If I took this cap off right now, we would lose that 10 pounds of pressure. This would flash boil, instantly turn to steam. That's when it would come up in your face. I've seen lots of people get injured over the years, almost seen people get killed doing that. So like I said before, always beware of hot systems. They are very dangerous. Even says right on the cap, remove slowly. Okay, so we're going to pressure test this cap. So what we need is this fancy little adapter here. All this allows us to do is put the cap on one side of it, like so. Make sure it's locked all the way on there. We're going to take out our pressure tester again. We're going to put on the other side of it. Turn our tab to lock it down. Okay, now we're going to pump up this cap right here. It's going to pump up pretty fast, but if it's a good functioning cap, we should get pretty close to 10 psi. It shouldn't go over, it shouldn't be way under. So let's pump it up here, see if we get close to 10 psi. Okay, you can hear it coming out. It won't let us go over 10 psi right there. Even if I pump fast, it's going to stay right at 10 psi. So this 10 psi cap is a perfect cap. Works really good. So you want to make sure you test that, because if this cap failed, where it wouldn't build up to 10 psi, you'd lose a lot of coolant boiling over. If you have an EGR system, it's going to heat up a lot and boil over. If for some reason this cap failed the other way, where it built up, to 30 psi, you would definitely blow out your radiator or coolant hoses. So always test your cap when you're testing the coolant system. You can see it only took a second to do. Could save you lots of time and money. Okay, so again, we're going to relieve the pressure. There's not too much volume in here, so it's going to come right out this time. Take our tester off, pump it a couple times, wipe it down, put it away. Radiator cap, take back off, wipe down our adapter, put that away. So now we're going to go put the cap back on. You can see there's little tabs on here, so it only goes on 180 degrees apart from each other. So make sure it's on there nice and tight. Like I said, if you have any other coolant leaked anywheres, make sure you wipe that up right away. It can take paint off, especially on a nice clean finish on a side of a car or something. I'm going to do a check on our Freightliner here. This is the Class's FL50 with the 5.9 Cummins in it. We're going to test the system here. So make sure we have on our safety glasses. We're going to remove the cap like we talked about before. Have a nice rag there. Make sure everything's cool. Touch the radiator if you can. Make sure everything's nice and cool. Touch the radiator if you can. Okay, this is nice and cool. We're going to loosen it up to the first stage there. No steam or anything came out like we talked about. So now we can remove it the rest of the way. Okay. So we'll inspect our cap. Everything looks good on it so far. Clean it off a little bit so we can read the pressure on it. This one's a 16-pound cap, so 16 psi we're going to pump this system up to. So always set your cap where you know where it is so you don't have to hunt for it later or put a new one on it. Okay, pump this a couple times. Make sure there's no spiders in there. We're going to put it on there. Make sure it's nice and secured on there. So this system here is a 16 psi system. So we're going to pump it up to 16 psi roughly. Maybe 1 or 2 pounds over. Okay, so right there, looks like we're at exactly 16 psi, as you can see on our gauge there. So now we're going to do our inspection. We're going to just let this hang out here. So we're going to walk around, check all the hoses and stuff like we did before. If everything's cool, don't be afraid to grab a hold of stuff. Remember, you got heater hoses going up into the cab and everything, so you want to make sure you feel everything you can. So you can see it's a little harder when it's on a vehicle. We got the hood and stuff. We can't get as close to everything as we could before. We'll walk around both sides. Check underneath. We have a couple little oil drops underneath, but they were already under there. These clamps are really cheap. This dollar clamp right here could cost you hundreds of dollars in maintenance fees. So if the clamp looks like it's starting to go bad, replace it. Okay, everything looks good so far. Okay, so we're still holding right at 16 psi. So now we're going to go do some other maintenance, and then we'll come back. Give it about a half hour just sitting here if you can, as long as nobody's in a hurry waiting for the vehicle. So we're at 16 psi. We'll come back in a half hour. Okay, so about a half hour has passed. You you can see that we're pretty much where we were before. Maybe it went down a little bit. It's common to lose, 2 or 3 psi and not have a leak on there. It's just, there's air bubbles in the system. Stuff's expanding, the hoses and stuff are expanding. So it's common to lose a couple psi, but what we don't want to see, we don't want to come back and have it down to 0 or down to 10. We want to have it within 2 or 3 pounds of where we left it a half hour ago. So this system looks good. We don't have any puddles underneath that weren't there before. Okay, so now we're going to remove the pressure tester. So again, nice slow. Get it down to 0 psi. Okay, we're down to 0. Going to remove it off of there. Give it a couple pumps. Wipe off any coolant that's there. We're going to go over to the workbench and pressure test our cap. So real quick, we're just going to put it on the tester. Only takes a few seconds. Okay, we got it on there. Just pump it up to 16 psi. Okay. Won't let us build up past it there. Looks like we're at about 16.5 psi. These aren't precision instruments. The gauge isn't precision, the caps aren't precision, but as long as you're in 1 or 2 pounds of it, it's good to go. So again, we're going to release the pressure on it. Take the cap back off, wipe everything off. Always make sure you return the tools to where they go between every use. That way you're not hunting for pieces and they're not getting damaged. Okay, we're back at our coolant system here. Okay, now we're just going to do a simple quick little freeze point test on it. These testers here aren't extremely accurate, but they give you a little range to start with. These are like $1 or $2 at Walmart or any auto parts store, so don't think they're precision devices. You can see it's just a little plastic flipper inside there, little squeeze ball. Not much going on, but I'll give you a quick little reference if you are in a pinch. So what you do with this, squeeze the ball, put it down in the tank, let it fill up with fluid there. Always have a rag there because these drip a little bit. Okay, so now wherever that pointer lands at, that's going to be the boiling point of it and the freeze point on the other side. So you can see our boiling point right here. It's probably about 261 degrees. Over on the other side, our freeze point is about negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's even good for our cold New York winters. It's not too often that we get down in the negatives, especially not down to negative 22. Okay, now we're going to take our coolant here and we're just going to dispose of it. We're not going to put it back in the tank. There could be contamination in our little testing device here. We want to try not to get any contamination back into the tank here. So we'll just get rid of that there. It's only pennies worth of coolant. So we want to make sure our hydrometer is nice and clean. As clean as we can. If this is going to be stored for a while and not used again, I recommend taking some nice clean water, like distilled water or something, cycling it through here a couple times, getting it nice and cleaned out. That way it can sit for a long time without getting weird inside there. So this is just a simple hydrometer. So what this does, it measures the specific gravity of the coolant that's in there. Tells us our freeze point and our boiling point. So our simple hydrometer, really cheap, somewhat effective, definitely better than nothing. The most effective thing we're going to use right now is the refractometer. This will give us a way more precise measuring of our freeze point. So we need our little pipette here. We need our refractometer. We're going to go back over to the truck. Okay, so we're back here at the truck. We're going to take our little pipette, put down in the tank, draw out a nice little sample. We're going to put it on our clean little screen right here. We're going to just let it close down. Okay, then we're going to stand underneath the light. You can't really see in there with the camera, but if I hold it up to my eye right now, I can look in there and there will be a chart. Our chart here inside here for ethylene glycol. So this says it's good for negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's actually right where our hydrometer was. So the hydrometer is somewhat accurate, especially for the price. The refractometer is going to definitely give you the best reading here. A good refractometer, about 40 to 50 bucks. They do get up to hundreds of dollars if you're going to get like a science grade one, but for what we're doing with the coolant systems and stuff, this is all we need. Okay, so again, we're going to dispose of our extra coolant there. Make sure everything's nice and clean when we put it away. You want to use a nice clean rag when cleaning this off. You don't want to get any oil or anything on there. It'll mess up your next reading. Make sure it's nice, clean, dried off. And put it back away. I like to leave the plastic open just a little bit on there. That way it allows it to dry better. Then we're going to seal that right away just so we don't get any contamination in there. Okay, so when we're doing our samples and stuff out of our coolant tank, what we're also looking for to make sure is there's no oil or anything in there. If we have any oils or different fluids inside the coolant system, it's usually going to be right on top of the expansion tank because oil floats in coolant. So here we have regular engine oil. Here's coolant down here. Here's just a layer between the two where they meet together. If the system's been ran recently, like within the day or so, it's going to be like a brown milky mixture. So if I mix this up right now, that's what your coolant expansion tank would look like. That's what your sample would look like when you drew it out of the tank. So if your sample looks like that, then you're going to have to start doing other tests on the system to see where it's coming from. Okay, our last test we're going to do with this coolant system, this is a fluid test strip here. See, there's a little chart inside here we're going to have to use in a minute. So set that where you know where it's at. We're going to take one of these test strips out of here. Try not to dump them all out. Try not to contaminate them all. So we're going to pull one out, and we're going to put the cap on again right away. We don't want to leave these out in the air. They will change color and not be any good anymore. So we're going to pull out this strip right here, take a pair of needle nose pliers, get a good grip on it, and we're going to go test our coolant. Okay, so we're back here at our coolant tank. We got our test strip here. We're just going to dip it down in there for 2 seconds. 1, 2. We're going to pull it out. Get away from the vehicle, shake it dry a little bit. Okay, now we're back over at our chart here. This is another not totally accurate thing. But you can see our little strips here are already changing color. So what this is going to do, this is going to test our pH and stuff, our alkaline levels, to make sure that we're not too acidic or too base. Most strips also have a freeze point, boiling point on it. So this is a red coolant. So we'll go to red coolant, then there's all others. So red coolant here, kind of match up the color best you can. Looks like we're between 25 and 33%. So that's good. Okay, so next we're going to check the pH on here. So the middle of the pad, we're going to use this side right here. So looks like we're right up here at the top. Okay, so we're between, must be a 3.1, it looks like it's between the two. So our instructions say go to the next step. So step number 3 over here. This is going to be the bottom of the pad. So we're going to match it up to the color here. Looks like it's right on the verge of failing. Maybe it's more between those, so we're still in the pass. So if this was a fail, first thing we would do, we would test it again with another test strip. But if it was a fail, we'd either have to add an additive to it to get it up to where we would need it, or down to where we would need it, or we'd have to change out all the coolant in the system, which could be kind of pricey, but it's a lot cheaper than an engine. If it's too acidic or too base, you're going to get more cavitation in this system. More stuff's going to break down. So you definitely want to check this at least once a year. Definitely the freeze point you want to check before winter.